Thank you, everybody, for being here. We are so incredibly honored to have somebody that will help us to uncover firsthand insights, experiences, strategies, somebody that is leading the way, quite frankly, not only where he is, which is Silicon Valley, but also wherever he goes. And with his voice through LinkedIn, he's changing minds. He's changing issues. He's empowering people one by one and then by masses sometimes. He inspires, he shares his knowledge. He has a very fresh perspective because he goes every day into a different setting and he is himself and he shows who we are. And I'm just honored to have him here because he will provide us a front row seat to the stories that are shaping this country and are shaping us. So please help me welcome our wonderful friend and leader, Frank Carbajal.
Thank you all. Thank you. And good afternoon and good evening for folks on the East Coast. Ana and I being based here on the West Coast and folks in Europe and in Mexico a couple hours ahead. I know, Ana, the hearts that you touch are global as well, international. And I think that the perspective that we have is from an international scope, being that my parents are from Mexico. God rest their soul. They both immigrated to the United States. Being the youngest of five, my birth name is Francisco Javier Carbajal. But during the educational system, the school teacher changed my name to Frankie at a very young age. But the thing about my parents is, I like to say they had a journey from the Imperial Valley, which is about 35 miles north of the border of Mexico, Mexicali, to the Silicon Valley. But before it became the Silicon Valley, it was known as Santa Clara Valley of the Hearts, the light. And I could get into that in a few minutes of why it was Santa Clara Valley before it became the booming Silicon Valley. And I also like to thank what I call an executive mentor, Saul Trujillo,
yes.
also known as Solomon Trujillo. And I know him well because I know his full name. Yes. And he is a person that really ignited me personally to become an author in the early 2000s. And I'll share why. There was this book titled Latino Future. And in the book, Saul's name popped up because he was one of the few Fortune executives, not only in the country, but globally. And his experience really resonated with me because his story and our stories need to be lifted daily. And so Saul, fast forwarding to my more recent book, Latinx Business Success, Saul provided the forward for that book. So I think
full circle, Frank.
Full circle, yes.
I love that.
Thank you. And I think it's important that during this conversation that we really also provide folks that helped us along the way. And I thank you, Ana, because without Saul, I wouldn't have met you. So
well, thank you. I agree with you. And you know what? Like you, I was inspired by Saul. And for those of you guys that don't know, Saul Trujillo founded the Latino Donor Collaborative at that point with co-founder Henry Cisneros, who's another incredible leader, mostly retired. But Saul Trujillo, as Frank well knows, he's probably the only American and actually the only human being that has been the leader of three of the largest telecom companies in the world.
Yes.
So his story is incredible. We'll have him in the podcast, so you'll hear
awesome.
his story. But just long story short, he has inspired us all because when he came back from his last CEO position as the head of one of the largest telecom companies in the world in Australia, the company is called Telstra. It's one of the biggest companies in the world. When he came back, he felt like there was a need for all these voices, the voice of Frank, my voice, and all of you guys' voice, because there was a narrative about Latinos that was not fact-based. It was false. It was a huge gap between reality and the perception of who Latinos were. So that's how he founded the Latino Donor Collaborative. And it was amazing to see him found it and then to work with him. For me, has been like one of the biggest joys because I learn from him, and as Frank, we get inspired every day with what he does. So thank you for acknowledging him. I agree, and I confess to be a soul fan also. So that's you and I are lucky. We've been able to follow him. We've been able to learn from him, and he supported us and empowered us. That's an important thing that he does constantly with a lot of different people. This weekend, he spoke at the U.S. Hispanic Leadership Institute.
Oh, Dr.
Of course, as
Andrade.
you can imagine.
Yes.
And
I know. I follow when Saul speaks because it really is. It's not only an authentic voice, but it's a voice of lifting us. During these times. So we really.
that's what he said. That's
Yep.
exactly. And actually, you can see his speech on our website.
Oh, cool.
That's
I'll check it
exactly
out.
what he said. He said, I'm here to remind you that if I did it, you can do it, because I came from the fields of Cheyenne, Wyoming, and there I was all around the world leading. And if he can do it, everybody can do it. That was his message. He was so powerful. And as you can imagine, Frank, he got a standing ovation of like 10 minutes. So thousands of students, just standing up and like
Oh, yeah.
crying and laughing with throughout his speech. It was really a joy to presence.
That's amazing. And before we dive into some of these questions that you ask, I have to say that the Silicon Valley Latino Leadership Summit that you closed out a couple of years ago, 3 of the top speakers that have accepted awards there: Saul Trujillo, Henry Cisneros, and Aida Alvarez. And
Oh my God, I love the 3. The 3 are incredible.
aren't they incredible? And what's interesting is they do not shy away from saying, Es Tiempo, it's time for, new leaders to take it to the next level. And that is what Saul, I say, he challenges us. And it's important to be challenged, right? It's very important.
Totally. That's what? That's really a key. And it's actually very important for our conversation today, Frank. He challenges us. He makes us get out of our comfort zone, right? Yes. In a lot of different ways. And I think this is more applied to Latinas than Latinos, but I am sure that Latinos also suffer it. We grew up with this thing of calladita te ves más bonita. And Saul, takes us out of that seat, our comfort zone, and said, no. I need you to be loud. I need you to be, quick on your feet. I need you to have an answer for everything. And I need you to speak up. And he constantly, encourages. And you can't be right next to Saul and not do it, because he's like telling everybody around, right? Like, speak up. And
That's
that.
amazing.
Right.
I have an incredible experience in the Silicon Valley, and one of the things I think is important, Ana, is how we are guided by mentors and how we provide mentoring to future leaders.
Yep.
But I'll never forget when my first book was published in 2008, and in 2009, a person by the name of Margarita Kiwis at Stanford University, who's a believer in my public speaking. But interestingly enough, I had not done so many keynote speeches. And one afternoon, she decides to invite me to lunch in Menlo Park. This area, Menlo Park, next to Palo Alto.
Of course.
Yeah. And she says, Frank, for our Hispanic, it was called Hispanic Net. For our Hispanic Net dinner in May, which was an annual event, we decided that we'd like to have you as a keynote speaker. And I was like, oh my goodness. One of the things, it's kind of like going back to Saul, when you're challenged, you have to accept the challenge. For all listeners, you accept the challenge.
Yep.
And I said, Margarita, I saw that the honoree is Linda Ronstadt. And she's like, yeah, that's right. I said, I don't know how I feel. She's like, of course you're nervous, but that's okay. That's okay. Just do it. And that way people could get to know who you are and your book. And so, Ana, there I was super nervous. And I want everyone to listen. We go through the motion, accept the nervousness, and understand that you're going to get through it. And once you get through it, it builds your platform. And so there I was, Stanford University at the faculty club. 6 feet in front of me was Linda Ronstadt, Aida Alvarez, And I look at both of them, and it's a sold out room. And Linda and Aida, you know what they did to me? They just gave me a thumbs up saying, you got
I
this.
love
Yeah,
that.
you got
Oh my
this.
God, I love them.
And so it's when you do your speeches all over the world, across the U.S., when you have the passion, put the passion into strategy and put the strategy into execution, and you got it.
Yes.
Because the passion is the storytelling, and then the strategy is the data, and then the execution is delivering what you already know. And when you cover those three areas, it's a success.
I agree with you 100%. And you know what? You just says it. So you know what? This is the perfect segue to get to our questions.
Sure.
Frank, because, the first one is, I want to know where you got that voice. So you were able to get out of your comfort zone, go to that speech where Linda Ronstadt was going to be listening to you, and Aida Alvarez, who's a giant in our community, et cetera, et cetera. How did you actually get, the courage? Because Solon, anybody can encourage us. If we don't have the courage, we just can't take the step, right?
Yes.
Yes. And you did it really young, by the way. That was 17 years ago. So it was not that you were seasoned like you are. I mean, you are obviously, and I'm sure you were, but it's not you. Like right now, it's easy to understand you in front of Linda Ronstadt. No doubt. There's not even but you were young. It was 17 years ago. So tell us a little bit of how you got there. Tell us a little bit of what's the story behind your success. Like how did you get here?
So, yeah, I love the question, and I want folks listening, especially during this time. And I say this country is under attack for immigrants, and my parents being immigrants, I got it from my mom and my dad. And I'll give two quick examples.
Oh my God.
My parents moved to Santa Clara Valley, now known as the Silicon Valley, in the early 70s. What they had in this area of the Silicon Valley were canneries. And canneries was like a promotion from field work, from people that were picking the fruit and the crops. So it was a step up to work in factories, to literally canneries, to can the fruit into these small containers.
Oh, wow. Okay.
Yes. And so my mom and dad did that 10 hours a day. And, they were able to purchase a home. But I'll remember the turning point that really provided me with insight of who my mom really was as a leader, as a fighter, as a warrior. That's why if people see my posts on LinkedIn, I'm not afraid, no tengo miedo, because of my mom. She, I would say, I'm only 5'8", and my mom was only 4'10". I said, Mom, if you were a few inches taller, I would have been 5'11", 6 feet. But she stood as a giant. And there was one day she was crying, Anna. She was crying, and my mom never cried. I remember how tough she was. She was tough as nails. And I asked her in Spanish. I said, what's going on? And she said that she was facing discrimination at work because her supervisor at the time wanted her and her comadres, her kinship of friends, to assimilate from speaking Spanish. My mom was monolingual, to speaking English. And my mom said, no way. She didn't feel comfortable. She wanted to speak Spanish with her friends. That's her comfort level. Yeah. And what happened was he kept like pushing her and pushing her. So what she did is she galvanized these ladies together, formed a union, and continued speaking Spanish. Yes. Continued speaking Spanish until she, retired 33 years at this job. And so when I saw that fighting spirit in my mom, I realized that's within my DNA.
Absolutely.
And the second one was my dad, God rest his soul as well. Wish they were alive today. What happened was my dad also worked in the canneries, but what happened with the Silicon Valley, they built all these tech companies that we'll get into in a few, and they outsourced the canneries to the Central Valley. So they moved out of San Jose, Santa Clara area, and they moved to like Modesto and Manteca and the Central Valley. And my dad became a janitor. And as a janitor, he worked hard. He took so much pride in being meticulous in cleaning. And I remember when I was in middle school to high school, to keep me out of trouble, he would take me with him to clean the offices of the Silicon Valley CEOs, venture capitalists, Sand Hill Road. And I just remember daydreaming, and my dad would remind me that the education part was the equalizer. So I stayed focused on school, and I ended up graduating from San Jose State. And at San Jose State, this was actually my first ever speaking opportunity at a big stage. They asked me to be one of the commencement speakers at San Jose State for my undergrad class. And as I accepted the role, I felt super nervous. And I say this because we all get these nerves, which means you're alive and you're motivated and you're pumped up. Yeah. And I remember the graduation, my dad, my mom, and my sisters, they're walking behind me, and I was pacing because I was nervous. I was walking ahead of my dad. And my dad says in Spanish, he says, "Mijo, despacio, ¿qué pasa? ¿Tienes vergüenza de nosotros? Are you embarrassed of us?" I said, "No." I said, "Papá, estoy nervioso." So in Spanish, he basically says, "Well, remember, your DNA is made up of a mop and a broom." And it made me laugh. He said that intentionally because he was a janitor. And that right there really made me realize, as Anna, as you know, and many folks who know me, I have two H's. I'm humble, but I'm hungry. Humility is part of who I am.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Oh my God. And that's exactly, you know, that's the balance that we have to live every day, right, Frank? Yeah. We Latinos, because, you know, humble, we were told to be humble, but humble doesn't mean having no dignity or having to, you know, downgrade ourselves or having to, you know, not talk about our successes. There's a part that is really important that we all have to learn, which is humble means you treat people equally.
That's
and
right.
That is incredible. And that's a quality that we have to have. We treat the CEO exactly the same as we treat the person that is working in the restaurant. But at the same time, we are humble, and dignity means recognizing our successes and recognizing others' successes.
Yes.
Right?
Yes.
I think that's one of the lessons, Frank, that, you know, having been born and raised in Mexico City and then coming here, you know, after college, I mean, actually later, I was, you know, I came, you know, on my late 20s. And that part is something that I really want to inject in everybody, because humbleness is great, but also assertiveness, right? And pride and identity and all that. That's important. And it seems like your parents taught you that very well. It seems like, you know, their humble jobs didn't, you know, interfere with you being proud, with you having a voice, with you going to college and making them proud.
Well, you know what's great? I love this conversation because you remind me of the balance that both my parents provided and instilled within me. Is that my mom was one that was much more courageous, that she was outspoken, and my dad had more of the humility factor. So it was a good balance. So the assertiveness came from my mom, and then the balance of humility came from my dad. Because I remember, I'll never forget, you know, I grew up in a barrio in East San Jose. And and my mom, she was so fearless that if there was gang members, she would run them off the yard. And I'm like, "Mom, what?"
Gang members were afraid of her.
They were afraid of her. And she was so assertive, and she was great, a great protector. And I think one of the things that we have to do in terms of the Silicon Valley now is, and I love the data that the Latino Donor Collaborative has, and maybe this could be a collaboration that we have together, is what you do is you put a number a year out there, right?
Yep.
And I was just thinking about this, Anna. I was thinking about my youngest daughter, who's a senior in high school, and I was thinking even younger Latinos behind my daughter that live in East San Jose, the Silicon Valley. I was thinking, why not have a year we target either 2040 or 2050 and look at how the Latino unicorns are here. Yes. They're hidden geniuses, and they're here in the Silicon Valley. And that way, the tech hub centers, the technology companies and startups could be on the east of the 101. And I'll tell you, this is my thought. I noticed that there's an infrastructure divide, and I call it the infrastructure divide 101, which means that anything 101 of Los Angeles all the way to San Francisco, From south to north, anything east of the 101 freeway are inequities, are disparities, are we're not seeing enough tech companies or not companies at all. What we see are mercados, which is fine, but we're not seeing the tequity that I like to say, the opportunity for these unicorns to build these multi-billion-dollar companies on the east of 101.
Yeah, yeah. Wow, that I never realized it. You're right.
Yeah, I just
All
thought
the way
like,
through California, the east part of the 101 doesn't, get the same opportunities.
That's
But
right.
it's almost like, wow, it is crazy. I haven't thought about it.
And get this, even more, and share this with some of your colleagues that when we think of East Palo Alto, we have way east Meta, but Meta is the only one. But guess what it did? It drove out the housing, gentrification. The gentrification is something that we as Latino in a Latino community have to invest in.
Absolutely.
Yes. So I was just thinking maybe 20, what do you think? 2040, 2050, what's a realistic number? But
I would say I would get very ambitious, 2040.
2040.
Yes,
Right around
because
the corner.
we have
Right
the
around the corner.
ingredients.
Yes.
First of all, Frank, and we do reports, right? And of course, we've done 65 reports up to date.
Yes.
And three actually of them are very focused. One is on tech and AI, specialty. The other one is with SHIP, the Society of Latino Engineers.
Yes.
And
yes.
the other one is about Latino youth. And from the three reports, the conclusion is there's so many beautiful conclusions that everybody should go to our website and actually download those reports. But I would say that to our conversation right now and to your goal of 2040, because yes, we should do 2040. I don't know if you know this, but to start with the countries where we come from, one of them being Mexico, I'm going to give you an example. Mexico graduates almost as many engineers as the United States, but Mexico has 1/3 of the population.
Yeah.
Engineering is in our blood.
Yes.
And
Yes.
engineers, and I don't know if you know this, and you have the numbers probably more accurate than me, but Silicon Valley itself imports all these engineers from Mexico, which is crazy because we don't hear about it. And there's so many. We hear about, of course, the engineers from China and from India, but we don't hear about the engineers from Mexico that are creating a lot of amazing things. That's one thing. The other part is here in the United States, according to SHIP, according to our first report in 2023, in 2010, 4% of all the engineers in school were Latinos. 4%. 4%. By 2021, 15% were Latinos. You're talking about a growth that is beyond normal. And that's because our youth is going to college. And wait, they're choosing important careers such as engineering. They're not choosing other than very important and challenging professions. In our second report, we say, imagine gathering all these needs for engineering in Silicon Valley with these graduate engineers that Silicon Valley don't know about, and just gathering them. And you have the same culture. You have nationals. You have people whose first language is English. It's just like a normal and natural marriage that we have to make happen. So, Frank, to your goal of 2040, let's do that. Let's do that together. Let's marry this set of engineers that are graduating from our community with the needs of Silicon Valley.
Yeah, definitely. And I really want to collaborate with you on that because one thing that I hear you saying is so where the fact-driven part of the United States educational system is we have to find ways where the public school system and charter schools collaborate versus being in competition with one another, because the support that public school systems may not see with charter schools is unfortunate. And what the public school system needs to see in terms of charter schools is many of our kids, our chavalitos, have Spanish-speaking parents only, and they live and reside in areas where there's charter schools. And
Yes.
for listeners, the charter schools are, for example, I'll give you some numbers here in the Silicon Valley have overtaken a lot of the spaces in the East Side public school system. And,
Wow.
yeah, and I know this because I am, an advisor to the East Side Alliance, and I'm going to try, I don't want to say convince, but just provide numbers like Anna, like when you provide data, it really shares that the win-win is really when the parent meets with the teacher. And when the parent meets with the teacher, you have more Spanish-speaking teachers in charter schools versus the public school system. And so these numbers need to be drawn up.
Absolutely. And especially, Frank, because one of the specialties of our culture, one of the things that I'm most proud of is the family, community, right? It's the way parents are involved in the lives of the kids and kids are involved in the lives of family. I don't know if you follow the president of Mexico, who is the first female
Yes.
president of
Yes.
North America, but
Yes.
she just had a conversation with President Trump and she said, and this was very open. It was very publicized in Mexico, not as publicized in the United States by the press, and they should have. But she said, "Hey, President Trump, we don't have a drug problem, and especially not as big as the one in the United States."
That's right.
And I'm going to share with you the campaign that we just did. All this to tell you that both the former president of Mexico and the current president of Mexico constantly point out that one of the many reasons why the problem with Latino kids is not as big as in other communities is family. So imagine to what you're saying that, with parents participating more with the teachers, parents participating more with the school itself, would make a big difference. Schools should be actively and intentionally bridging that gap of language, which probably is the biggest gap, the biggest, bridge that has to be crossed, by those parents, and cooperate together, right? Work
Yeah,
so that
and
the kid succeeds.
Yeah, exactly. And you mentioned something about President Sheinbaum. Claudia is an inspiration, and hopefully one day I'll get to meet her because she really is a person that if my parents were alive today, they'd be so proud. And I think that it's important to point out that I won't name exactly the organizations, but in the United States, they have motorcycle gangs that are American that are providing the drugs. So
Absolutely.
enough is enough with this stereotyping, these projections, these perceptions that it's coming across the border. Because anytime I've been to Mexico, beautiful Mexico, I feel safer there than I would in Alabama. And I am so honest about it that, I just feel that it really is education. Education is the key, and we got to keep plugging away. So
Absolutely. And Frank, we go back to the subject of this podcast, which is the narrative, and which is bridging the gap between the reality and the stereotype and all this rhetoric, right? And that is one that is very important, which is Mexico, dangerous. They are evil because they make drugs. And,
yeah.
first of all, people don't consume drugs in Mexico.
No.
Second,
No.
there are drugs because people are consuming here, and because and there are narcos in Mexico because they're buying guns from
From the
American
US.
companies. In Mexico, Frank, there's only one source to buy guns in the country. I don't know if you know this. Guns are forbidden. So the only way you can buy a gun is to go to the military. There's one place, it's called Estado Mayor Presidencial. And you go there and you ask for a gun. And for you to get a permit for a gun is almost impossible. Mostly,
that's right.
yeah. So there's no access to
Yeah.
any kind of violence, with armament so everything is coming from the United States. And so the myth is, and that's another thing that President Sheinbaum mentioned, right? Like, hey, if you stop the guns coming to our country, there will be no terrorism and there will be no violence. So, and if you stop consumption, even less. So why don't we work on helping you, United States, to fix your two problems, which
Yes.
is,
Yes.
violence and drug addiction, and then everybody will be better.
And one last quick point on that is yesterday I had a meeting with a gentleman from España, from Spain, and he's visiting the Silicon Valley and he's going to go to Vancouver for AI. I need to make an introduction to you because he's an AI architect. And so he works with this company, and he said he felt safer in Mexico versus Memphis, the middle America, where it's supposed to be, the perception of freedom. So let's just stop with Mexico, and you and I will continue to elevate,
Absolutely.
the beautiful homeland.
The former ambassador to Mexico, Ken Salazar, who just finished.
Oh yes, Ken. Yes.
He was sharing some numbers about the Americans registered with the State Department that have moved to Mexico City and to other places since the pandemic. And there were more than 2 million people. Wow. Americans moving to Mexico to live. Wow. Mexico City, San Miguel de Allende, Guadalajara, Monterrey, Oaxaca, Cancun. I mean, all those areas, right? And so a friend of ours that was with us was saying, well, if it was that violent, I bet people wouldn't be running away to Mexico, escaping from things that they may not like to see here, because these are people that are just happy there. And by the way, the clarification also was, these are the people registered with the State Department. There are many more Americans living in Mexico that are not registered because they don't need to, right? If you come back every 6 months, you don't need to register. You can be a tourist in Mexico. So it's so interesting how the rhetoric and the negativity really doesn't have any base. That's the cities, and you know this, Frank, very well. The cities on the border, on the side of the United States, are some of the safest cities in the country. It's a lot of myth. And of course, there is a part of, drug production that happens in Mexico that is undeniable, but it's very isolated. And again, there's a market. And so therefore there will always be a producer as long as the market exists, whether it's Mexico or China or, Japan or India or Russia will produce the drugs because the drugs are being bought.
Yeah, exactly. And for another, podcast, we could either challenge the big pharma that is a gateway for a lot of these drugs to happen here. The pharmaceutical drugs that kids are accessing. They don't access it from Mexico. They access it from the big pharma here in the United States.
And Frank, how did it start? Purdue Pharmaceuticals.
Yes, exactly.
Started that crisis. So it's interesting how Americans forget, because there's many documentaries on Netflix, giving information, this kind of information to every American. But they tend to forget that. I don't know why.
And speaking of Netflix, where do you think Netflix was born?
Tell me.
Here in the Silicon Valley, and here locally, about 15 minutes away from my house is the international corporate headquarters. It was started by Reed Hastings. Reed Hastings is the emeritus, chairman. And get this, Mexico, it has the rights to $1 billion in terms of a partnership with Netflix to produce. Yes. Have you asked Jeff about that?
Oh, yes. So first of all,
it's amazing. Why isn't it happening here? Think about that. Because Mexico is a great partner.
Yes, absolutely. And I actually saw the announcement. He was, what's his name? Ted Sarandos, who's the CEO now, made the announcement right next to the president, of Mexico. $1 billion invested.
That's huge. Oh, that's
at
huge.
least 20 different movies and series, right? Coming from Mexico. And he said that. He said, we've been extremely successful with everything that has been produced here by Netflix, and we want to increase that investment. They are actually, also, besides the 1 billion, they are also investing in renewing all the most important studio in Latin America. It's called Estudios Churubusco. And so, they're refurbishing, reinvesting, renovating those studios, and they're there for good. And you wonder, right? Like, if it's so dangerous, and somebody was joking about, well, but what about and it was a question as a joke, actually, but like, what about your producers and your executives? And he was like, he didn't say it, but he kind of implied that he felt really safe in Mexico,
Oh, for
and
sure.
that's
Yeah.
why they were
Yes.
investing that amount. And Frank, it's not only Netflix. I mean, you have the banks, you have the consumer product companies, you have sports. NFL is investing tremendous amounts of money in the in fans, cultivating fans in Mexico. So no, I mean, record number of investment in the country tells you that it's not as they want to paint it.
That's right.
Um,
That's right.
Definitely.
That's
But,
right.
based on that too, because I know you and I are just so proud of where we come from, and we really wear it on our sleeves, right? I mean, it's not that we say hello, how are you, Amana, I'm Mexican, but I almost say that, yeah. And of course, in my case, my accent, obviously says it right away. But tell me, how has your culture impacted your trajectory in your success? Because I think that's a great segue to what we've been saying.
You know, it's interesting because in the United States, I don't know. I'm 55, so in the 70s and 80s, there was that key word of assimilation. Assimilation was almost like indoctrination of understanding American history, feeding American history down your throat, and understanding that you're American. But at the same time, I grew up in a barrio, and the barrio that I grew up in was something that really kept me cultured, kept me proud. We had mercados like a mile away from our house. So it wasn't something that I really felt that I was going to leave my heritage and who I am as a person. And I think that it really was challenged, though, in college. You had mentioned you studying in Mexico, but in college, the universities here, what happens is, Anna, it's really sad to see that you may have one Latino Hispanic in the classroom and actually more blacks in the classroom than Latinos in certain studies, especially engineering. I wasn't an engineer, but business, it dropped to numbers where I realized that I never felt like an imposter because I played soccer, I played football, so I really had a team concept of diversity. But what I did see is I saw how many people in our community, Latinos, Latinas, it wasn't that they were ashamed, but and I know you're never a person that felt like an imposter because you're proud, you're confident, and so when I felt that I gotta show that it's okay to express who you are, it's okay to let people know that you speak Spanish, it's okay to let people know that you have nopales, that you eat nopales. It's okay to let people know that mariachis is the number one type of music in the world. So for me, it was something that started really as far as challenging people. We talked about challenge early on in the segment, that you got to be proud. You got to be proud. So I had to role model, and I was in college. And
Oh, wow.
yeah, and that's what really, at an
Do
early
you
age.
remember an example you can give us? Because I think our audience would love to know, like, for example, give us an example of when standing up for who you are, because it's part of your DNA, actually turned out to be a blessing and a privilege,
Yeah.
right? A
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
superpower, we say.
Okay. Yeah. No, because we're having fun. We're having fun where this is something that is reality. And by the way, Saul Trujillo shared a newspaper article where they had him on a donkey with a sarape when he was in Australia.
Yes, in
Yeah.
Australia, yes.
So similar story for me, when we're in college and, you're here in the US and you're successful, a lot of your network is, white folks, right? A lot of white folks. And there was this white lady who, in front of about 15 people, she called me a burrito. She's like, "Hey, you're one of those, spicy burritos, right?"
Oh my
And I
God.
said, "What?" And I took offense to it. She thought it was funny. I took offense and I said, "Wait, whoa, whoa, whoa." And right there at that very moment, that was in college, I felt that if I did not exercise my voice, that within the small network at that time would have amplified the stereotype, then I feel that any time in life with any innuendos or direct comments like that, we have to have courage and we have to step up and we have to show people. And I say that because this new administration is saying it daily. And as voices, I gave that example of a burrito because that is how a lot of people in America feel today. And what we got to do is we have to educate, we have to show numbers, data, and more importantly, we got to stand up for one another.
Absolutely. And Frank, I think your example is right on point because I want to share some information that we got from yet another one of our reports, and I'll tell you about it. But because I think it's first a generational problem, but also I agree with you that the attacks are probably worse than ever.
Oh, yeah.
But I also, for the results that I'm going to give you from one of the reports that we just did last year, we are not the same. And again, that's where I say generational, right? I even see the difference between me and my kids who are college age, right? They're different. And so let me tell you about this report. It's, we started, when we did SHIP, we realized the power of these engineers that were Latinos. And we were like, these kids are so important and so powerful. We want to know more about them. So we went to Kantar, who's the leading research company of consumer products in the world. And we said, please, we want to know more about this youth. But what would be our surprise that as we were getting ready to do this report, we started hearing from brands saying, hey, can we jump in? Hey, can we do the report with you? And of course, we were so happy because first of all, the cost of the report goes down, which is fantastic because it's amongst a lot of other companies.
Yes.
But also, as we were getting ready to do it, we all agreed that we would all participate in the research. All this to tell you that the findings of this, so full disclosure, one was L'Oreal, the brand L'Oreal. The other one was Capital One. The other one was Colgate-Palmolive. And then Televisa Univision. At the end of the report, we were laughing of how many times we were teary-eyed, how many times we were impressed, how many times we went to sleep thinking, who are these people? They are super people. They have superpowers. And Frank, difference between them and us, the parents, and between them and other, Gen Zers and Gen Xs. First of all, difference with us, they are extremely assertive. They know who they are. They're extremely proud of where they come from. They've been translating for their parents and listening to the things that their parents have been accused of since they were born. They were born here, by the way. 93% of them were born here. So they're American. They don't have the fears that their parents had, but they saw their parents going through this. And so they are assertive. They have a voice. And I got to tell you, they're in this world to make their parents' sacrifice worth it. So what else can you want for a population that is educated, that is going to college, that is American, so they don't have those issues that their parents had, but are in a commitment to make their parents' sacrifices worth it. So that's incredible. And then with other Gen Zers that are American, they also have a high level of sensitivity to the environment, to equality, because for them, that beauty and that success also encompasses success as people, as a good person, as, bringing a better world, wherever they go. So going back to, your terrible experience, which is also my husband's experience, when you guys were young, etc.
Yeah.
These kids are amazing. I mean, and pop culture has helped, right? They are driving pop culture in so many ways, so they feel much more confident. There's Bad Bunny, there's Peso Pluma, there's Grupo Frontera, there's the Carolina Herreras and the Hermes and all these different brands that are showcasing Chicano art, and they're, so it's a different world. Mm-hmm. And I just have so much faith in them. And especially when you see those numbers, it's just incredible. The United States is extremely lucky to have that cohort.
Yes, indeed. And I know one of the things that we had mentioned about the technology here in the Silicon Valley, I wanted to share just before we end here that the Mexicans, as far as the report of Department of the DHS it's a low number, 3.2 thousand Mexicans in technology and 2.5 Brazilians, 2.5 thousand and
Yes.
3.2 thousand Mexicans with the H1 that we had talked about the status.
Which one?
And,
Wow.
and yeah, so it's not as high as we'd like, but what's even more work for us in terms of collaboration is what we talked about, the Mexican Americans, the first or second generation that are in college right now, and not taking away from any trade schools or a specialty, but there is something that we as leaders have to do to encourage these young folks that are in college to study the engineering programs, to get those internships at these high-tech companies in the Silicon Valley, and then learn your craft. And once you have your craft down, then build a company. So those are the things that I wanted to make sure to mention.
That is such a great advice. Thank you. And you know what? We go back to another point that we were supposed to touch. Of course, we are running out of time, but because it always happens with you, Frank, there's so much to talk about. But tell us, why do you believe that the communication between U.S. Latinos and Latinos from Latin America is so important for the future of the U.S.?
It's not only important for Latinos that are from here to Mexico, but it's also important for us to build allyships with Latinos in Central America, in South America. And I have to share with you, Ana, that the very successful Latinos that I've met here in the Silicon Valley that have worked at these high-tech companies have been from Peru, Peruvian. Yes. And one, for example, Jorge Tettinger was the CEO at SGI, Silicon Valley Graphics, and he was the first, and he studied from Peru and received a scholarship to Stanford. And one thing I'd like to say is, let's make our differences more common. And what I mean by that is that we have to provide access and human capital to these successful folks, whether they're in South America, Mexico, and make sure at the end of the day that we have first and second generation Latinos here in the Silicon Valley, or where you live, or in New York or Florida and Middle America, Chicago, with these resources in terms of scholarship opportunities. Mm-hmm. The scholarships that we have cannot be under attack. We have to make sure, as us being the voice, to provide these resources to these students so that they could study and they can't, be shortchanged. And I think that the difference is that many, as we know, many folks from Mexico, as you had mentioned earlier, have great engineering programs, great math programs, great science programs. Same with Peru, same with Brazil, same with Argentina, same with Colombia. And the difference is it's huge disparity when we talk about the Latinos that reside here, that are born here into the educational systems, where math and science is at the very bottom in terms of global competition.
Yeah.
So it behooves us, in terms of the differences, to make more common, to build the partnerships with Mexico, Colombia, Peru, and Brazil during these tough times.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Thank you, Frank. That's amazing. And just to conclude this great conversation, I would love to ask, what piece of advice would you give to our young listeners?
I love it. And I think the advice that we need to provide all young listeners is, please know that there is a mentor that wants to provide you with the seeds of nuggets that they have, the seeds of leadership that they have, because every person that has made it to the level of success hasn't been done alone. It's been done because of a mentor. So for listeners, young listeners, know that Ana and myself are available to you all, and know that there is so many people that helped us along the way. So mentoring is key.
You're so right. And asking for mentors, right?
Asking for mentors and be reciprocal. Remember, don't just say, I'm going to email you. Make sure that the communication is formed.
Yep. You're absolutely right. And I love LinkedIn for that, Frank. Look for us, connect with us, follow us. I think that's extremely important. And actually that's a perfect way of finishing and saying goodbye to our audience and to you. Follow, please, the Latino Donor Collaborative on your social media. We have a campaign that is called Elevate Latinos. Please follow us in all the social media platforms. We try to digest the information that we have for you. And we have infographics, etc. But know who you are, know your value. That's what we do at the Latino Donor Collaborative. We create data that shows the economy that you have built, that your parents have built for you, and how much we've already earned a place on every important table, and we just have to take it now. So,
and last person I'd like to mention. You speak of connected is Guillermo Diaz, founder of Conectado. The word connected, Conectado. And Ana, you're awesome. Thank you so much for this time.
No, thank you. And Frank, you with Guillermo and with the incredible pioneers that we have in our community in Silicon Valley. Thanks for making sure that, our kids have the most access possible, that our kids just know where to go when they need mentorship, when they need sponsorship, when they need guidance, when they need role models. To be honest with you, just having you here, I'm sure, will inspire kids that are, that look forward to being like you, right? So thanks for being with us. And I look forward to many of this with you.
It is an honor. It was an honor. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Frank. See you soon.